Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, lived a young, handsome king. The king was different from other kings, as he had a rather unusual habit. A really unusual habit, in fact. A young maid who started her employment at the palace could not help noticing how the young king would, on a regular basis, go into the majestic gardens and pick up small pebbles and sometimes even larger rocks, only to put them into his pocket. "Why would you pick up rocks and put them into your pockets?" the young maid asked. "You see," said the king, "every time I make a mistake, I pick up a rock to remind myself of my misdeed. For small mistakes, I merely pick up a small pebble. For big mistakes, large rocks." "Oh, and you place them in a special place in your palace, I assume?" asked the maid. "Oh, no," answered the king. "I carry them with me for the rest of my life, so I never forget what I did wrong, and that I am eternally guilty for my wrongdoings." The maid rather wondered about this habit, which seemed a little odd to her, but dare not speak about it to the king, for it was not her place to do so, she was told. Years passed, and the king's pockets were too small for all those rocks and pebbles. So His Majesty started carrying small bags around with him wherever he went. After yet more time, the bags were eventually replaced by large sacks of corn, which were now filled with rocks instead of corn. No one dared to ask the king why he did what he did, and no one dared to tell him to change this rather unusual habit either. By the time the king had grown old and tired, his body ached, and he was in constant misery, for the small bag with which he had started was now an enormously large bag of rocks. It was too big and too heavy to be pulled along with him, and caused him great pain. The king therefore barely left the palace, and was not what you could call good company to anyone. The maid, who had witnessed her master for so many years by now, could not bear to see him suffer like this any more, and finally found the opportunity to speak to him one more time. "Great king, you are tired, you are miserable, and you can barely stand on your own 2 feet any more. Please let go of the bag of rocks once and for all." "I cannot," spoke the king. "I shall always be burdened by my own mistakes. I have to be reminded of each and every one of them at every step I take in my life. This is my fate." The maid humbly approached the king and sat down near his throne. "My king," she said, "the only person who suffers from your past mistakes right now is you, and you alone. Look around you. Your guilt makes you heavy and full of grief. All the joy has gone. Your face has become old, sad, and full of pain. This is not what life is about. Just let go of the rocks. Let go of your guilt about mistakes that are no longer relevant. They're in the past. You are guilty only in your head," the maid explained. "There is no need to suffer. If anything, you have become a really sad version of yourself, and right now, everyone around you suffers with you, for you are miserable, irritable and moody, weak and grumpy. Your past mistakes have spoiled the present you. Let go of the rocks, and you will be free." The king was astonished about the blunt advice the maid had given him, but he felt a gush of relief in her words, for they actually made sense to him. Could it be true that he need not suffer for every mistake he had ever made? Could he be free of his past? He bent forward and gazed into the innocent eyes of his maid. "And why do you think no one has ever told me these comforting words before?" he asked. "My king," she whispered, "everyone is his own master. No one dared to tell you how you should walk your path of this life. But if we are not compassionate towards one another and hold each other on our journey, each of us ends up suffering so much. Not one soul in your kingdom enjoys watching you in pain. We all wish for nothing else than for you to be free of your guilt, for you to drop your bag of rocks and be a happy, benevolent king again. All you have to do is accept our love and our wishes, and you shall be free. Free of guilt, free of your past, free of the rocks." The king felt tears streaming down his face as his heart opened. He rose up from his throne and signalled some knights to help him carry the heavy sack of rocks into the garden. There, the king and his men piled them up, making a tall mound of rocks. And there they stayed, from then onwards. The king was finally free. He was able to breathe and run and dance and even ride his beloved horse again. And the pile of rocks was left in his garden as a constant reminder that those rocks were where they belonged. Far away, distant memories and no more resting on his shoulders. For guilt was merely a myth, he now came to understand, just as the maid had told him. And what about the maid, you may wonder? She was never seen again. No one knew where she went, but everyone kept her in their hearts, for she had transformed the kingdom into a place of beauty and joy once again.